hosting authors locally and globally. And, everything has changed since the pandemic. And it's kind of been a blessing in disguise because we can welcome authors from all over the place while we're still here. So we're very excited to have two very fantastic authors today. We're going to travel to space and across the sea with their new works, and I'm just delighted to listen to their conversation. We have Courttia, who is the author of 7 books, including A River Called Time, The Gospel According to Cain, and his much-lauded debut, The Scholar. In 2016, he was awarded the Roland Rees Bursary for playwriting. As a screenwriter, he has written 2 episodes of the Steve McQueen BBC series Small Axe. So he's very busy and has made his time to generously be here. Joining him is Alex Wheatle, who is the author of several best-selling books, including the young adult novels Cane Warriors and Homegirl, the modern classic Brixton Rock, and the multi-award-winning Crongton series. He is the subject of the historical drama film Alex Wheatle, which is part of filmmaker Steve McQueen's lauded anthology series Small Axe. His body of work was a finalist for the 2021 NSK Newstat Prize for Children's Literature and has won numerous awards, including the Guardian Children's Fiction Prize. They're both incredibly busy and accomplished, and so honored that we have them in our company. Jerry Thompson will be moderating the talk, and he is one of my favorite people, 2, an amazing bookseller, and 3, an editor in his own right of Oakland Noir and Berkeley Noir. And he's just beyond amazing, and I'm so glad all of you could join us for this talk. So I'm going to leave it to you. I'll come back on. We do encourage chat and questions throughout the event, so anything that you want to throw in there, we'll get to the authors at the end. And with that, I will come back at the end of the talk. I hope everyone enjoys this.
Great, thank you, Elena. Thank you very much, and thank you, Books Inc. It's always nice to know that I always have considered you a part of my bookstore family in the Bay Area. I know Alex and Courttia, you know nothing about me in some respects, except from what you've perhaps read in the press releases, but I've kind of worked in a number of bookstores throughout my career, 30 years here and doing events, and I live for these types of conversations. And to meet you virtually today has been something I've been building up and anticipating for about 3 or 4 months. I did a deep download, love fest group session with you guys. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of my thoughts and actually asking questions that have not been asked of you in the past. I mean, I've looked at a number of videos and interviews over the past few months. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to getting your nuances. And well, first off, congratulations on your new books. I want to thank our publisher, Johnny Temple from Akashic Books for bringing us together. Very excited for you to be with Akashic and to launch your books with Books Inc. for the West Coast of California. I'm here. There are many African-American booksellers in the Bay Area longing for materials with strong female leads, and then of course the amazing subject of speculative fiction. First off, hello, how are you guys doing?
Good, really good. Yeah, tired but good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. It seems like we're finally coming out of the pandemic, even though there's still a lot of infections, but places are opening up a little bit more now. So I'm a bit more confident of going out in the last week or so.
Are you? I feel completely
a little bit.
I feel completely the opposite. I'm like I'm very, very wary. Like my son went to Westfield the other day, the big shopping center. Well, today actually, and he was going to the Apple store, and I was like, "Take your mask and take the sanitizer and wear gloves." yeah. So.
Oh yes, I'm still wearing my mask and my sanitizer. I'm still doing that. I'm still obeying all the sensible, things that we have to do.
Yeah. Very, very tense time. I have a confession. I have to put it straight out there. Kemosha of the Caribbean and the Cosmogramma, they embrace 2 of the most powerful narratives of my life. I mean, rising the voice of strong Black women and I'll admit it here first, my long internal conversation with my relationship with space travel, aliens, and the possibility of living in other galaxies. When I first moved to Oakland, I was convinced there were aliens here, and spaceships were landing in my backyard or near the airport. So to have these two very strong dynamics that speak to me in books that I can carry around, and I have, I think, over the past few weeks or so, I walked around with their books. I used them on my commute. I slept with them. I had breakfast with them. I had dinner with them. Two totally different styles of writing. And I know that, Alex, this is a transition for you. I know you've done a lot of contemporary novels, and to dive into the historical aspect of Kemosha is groundbreaking for many of your established fans and for new fans like myself. Would you guys mind sharing a little bit about the origins of your two new books?
Okay, with Kemosha of the Caribbean, I've just finished Cane Warriors, and it's quite male-dominated, if you like. Male heroes trying to fight for their freedom, and I always felt that women are left out of the narrative in here, and we all know that women have been incredible heroes throughout North American life, throughout Caribbean life. And I just felt it was about time to pen something that honors that courage, that determination. And also, when I was reunited with my father in 1987, he took me to Port Royal. I mean, my first request to him was for him to take me to 9 Mile, where Bob Marley was born, but he didn't like reggae. So it ended up, he had to kind of drag me to Port Royal, which was at one point the wickedest, baddest city on earth. It was a pirate hub. Wow. Where all guys like Captain Morgan hang out, and Calico Jack and so on. And then when I walked through the small museum there, I discovered that there were female pirates as well. There was Mary Read and Anne Bonny. And that fascinated me way back in 1987. So I felt that if I ever write a piratical kind of narrative, that it would include a female narrative of sailing the seven seas and daring do, sword fights. Because, you know, I remember when I was young, I used to love those Errol Flynn films. I don't even remember those Captain Blood films and so on. I think even Gene Kelly, he used to star in those high sea adventures as well before he tap danced and so on. And so, yeah, I really wanted to just write an adventurous tale with a lot of daring do, and this time a woman gets to be the hero instead of somebody like Orlando Bloom or who's the other guy? Johnny Depp. As in Pirates of the Caribbean. So I wanted to offer something different.
For me, with Cosmogramma, I mean, it was a long time in coming. I think just after I'd written my first novel, The Scholar, which was, you know, set on council estates or like the projects of London, I had an idea to write a science fiction novel. I was always sure that I wanted to do different things, and I've always loved science fiction. I say to a lot of people, my love of science fiction came firstly probably from dub music, you know, being in blues dances and hearing dub and just being like, whoa, this just feels like I'm having an out-of-body experience, you know what I mean? This feels like it's space and there's all these noises and whatever it feels like outer space would feel like, but in a kind of musical sense. And then later came, you know, Star Wars and, you know, all the 2001 Space Odyssey, and I got tuned into that and I was like, oh yeah, this is kind of a representation. But obviously it was very, apart from Lando and stuff, you know, and that didn't come to Empire Strikes Back, it wasn't like a black representation. I was getting into Grace Jones, I was getting into like Sun Ra, you know what I mean? I was getting into like Lee Scratch Perry. So I was like, you know, feeling very connected, scientists, you know, like Mad Professor, all of these people who was tuning me into kind of a sci-fi experience that I just dug and loved. So after my first novel, I had the idea for River Called Time, You know, it was like 1997. I had the idea for River Called Time, and I can remember, yeah, the day that I had the idea, basically, or the day that I had an out of body experience. A few months after publishing The Scholar. And so because I had that out of body experience, that's when I said, okay, now I know what my science fiction novel is going to be about. I'm going to try and marry African cosmology with sci-fi. And that's going to be my big novel. And then, you know, I tried to write it and stuff, and it took me many years, and I published 2 other novels before I even got to even write in A River Called Time. And then it was meant to be my 4th novel, actually. And I wrote part 1, and then I got blocked. Well, I got blocked creatively, and I got blocked by the industry as well, because they were kind of like, boy, I don't think you should be writing this type of novel. But while I put that to one side, yeah, they were saying, you know, like, you're doing science fiction, you're supposed to be a contemporary novelist. They're saying, oh, this is kind of weird because you're trying to merge the very thing I was trying to merge, mysticism, as they called it, and sci-fi. They said didn't mix. You know, it was all just like new. And this was years. We're talking about, this was like the year 2002. So this is years before Black Panther. So I know Octavia Butler exists. I know Sam Delaney exists, and I know all of these other Grace Jones. You know, we know about Black sci-fi, right? But in terms of like the world, they didn't really know it. So I went on. I carried on writing contemporary stuff. I started writing a bit more abstract stuff. I messed with surrealism a little bit, but I always wanted to write sci-fi. And then slowly, the stories from Cosmogramma started to come, and I've been writing Cosmogramma. I reckon it's from about 2008, 2010. I started writing like some of the stories. I think Scarecrow was one of the first. I know in 2006, I'd written a spin-off to A River Called Time, which was called The Osiris Principle, which is this. It's a novella, but it hasn't been published. It's just, you know, it deals with a character called Harmon Wallace that's in A River Called Time and his life. So I just continued writing sci-fi, but just undercover. And yeah, finally, that now, you know, 2000 and whatever, I get them out, you know. But I've always had that, you know, I've always had that feeling in me, that idea that I wanted to write sci-fi, even from my first novel.
It sounds like these stories come to you when they're ready.
Of course, yeah.
This is the portal. You kept the door open, and you respond to the events that are happening in your life, of course, but they're also triggering character development and nuance of narrative that may propel an arc in the story. Are you guys familiar with the writer Ben Okri?
Very.
Yeah. And I know when I would read Ben Okri, there was all this mystical aspect of his characters, hearing voices and move around spiritually. And no one talks about him as much anymore, but Akashic has also published his books as well. Are there other writers that you feel are doing what you're doing, respectively, in both genres right now? Historical fiction with strong female lead characters, and then the speculative fiction. And how would you describe speculative fiction?
I don't know, speculative fiction, I kind of try not to define it. It sounds like a really weird thing to say, actually, but I try and I'm like, I don't want to put my finger on what it should be, because I want to be open to be able to create, you know, in tune with what people are doing, but also outside of what people are doing. So like Afrofuturism, that kind of thing. I kind of even struggled to put my books in that vein, because I feel like they're doing something slightly new. So yeah, speculative fiction. I mean, if I had to be pinned down, it's like, you know, like an off branch of like science fiction as it, you know, as a genre. And it can be anything from like steampunk to horror to surrealism to, you know, like traditional sci-fi, you know, many different kind of branches come under that. But yeah, I kind of, I try and stay away from what you know, a kind of fixed definition. And what was your first part of your question? Sorry.
Do you find that there are new writers coming or creating type of fiction? And if so, who might they be? And same with Alex as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Sorry, I was just going to say quickly.
Even if they're not stateside, I mean, if they're in Britain, or if you some writers, I know Key Miller. He's not a fiction writer, but
Oh
there's
yeah, Kai writes fiction. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, he does.
But other writers that we should be looking forward to reading, and that you know about, that coming over and making their debut, if you will, through the States here.
It's
for our
very
readers.
rare, from what I'm aware of narratives coming from historical places that I love so much. There's Kai Miller, who I think he
Yes.
Courttia probably knows more about his work than I do, because I know you're collaborating with him over a project. And I think that narrative was based over 100 years ago or so, or something like that. But nothing in the 17th or 16th century, I believe. So there's not a lot to go on. I mean, I know there's a lot of non-fiction that concentrates on the 16th, 17th, 18th century in North America and so forth. And you know, there's stories about the Atlantic trade, the sugar trade, and so forth, and stuff like that. But as for YA fiction, there's very little of it. So I kind of felt, yay, this is a really unexplored kind of nugget here. There's so many stories there at that time, at this point of history. I mean, you had Captain Morgan sacking Panama, and he made something like an astronomical amount, or something like £3 million from doing that raid. I mean, it's incredible when you think about it, that hardly any more stories have been written about that era and what these pirates were doing. I mean, basically, in my mind, they were socialists, because being a pirate was the only way you could basically get on the kind of career ladder, if you like. I mean, otherwise you were dirt poor, probably worked in the fields, but if you went off to sea and you can make your fortune, then the world was your oyster. And it was, because people like Captain Morgan, he ended up being probably the richest man in the Caribbean.
Amazing.
So that era really tantalizes me, and it fascinates me and compels me. But as for fiction, YA fiction, there's not a lot of it around.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's like, just thinking on authors that you guys might not have heard of. I mean, Katherine Johnson is doing some good YA historical fiction. Patrice Lawrence is doing some as well, right? Like she's got some YA historical fiction. Trying to think who else. Jennifer Macumba. She's like more adult novelist, but she did a historical novel set in I think it's Uganda. I'm not sure. I think it's Uganda. Don't quote me on that, but I know it's definitely African historical fiction for adults. You know, your guys, you know, Robert Jones Jr., The Prophet. Oh man, I love that novel to death. You know, that's a brilliant historical novel. And I like, you know, I tell everyone, man, I'm a big Percival Everett fan, man. I love Percival Everett. He's like my favorite writer. I've been going on for years about Percival, boy. And yeah, he writes some historical novels from time to time. He's written some historical kind of like Western novels, or one or two, I think, you know.
So, like you guys, he does poetry and screenplays, and he's across the board. But that's one more reason why I love you guys, because you're just not limited to one particular aesthetic. You're fearless in a lot of ways, and you're giving us so much to learn, to explore, and to remember about family and history, and the soul of our history. Music is a very strong element to, well, how can I say this? Let me go back. Listening to you guys read, I have to digress a little bit. I've the passion and the drummer, the heat that I get from hearing you guys read, and also the poetry, it just mesmerizes me. And I've spent a few nights over the past month and a half. I had one night with Alex, and I had one, and then I mixed it. And when Cosmogramma came out, for example, I thought, oh my God, Flying Lotus, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, what's this? What the heck?
Oh my gosh.
I ran to my turntable and my albums, and I thought, okay,
oh man,
and to have it written in a way that you would read it as if it was an album playing.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Tell us about the music in your development of your stories and how that plays? Do you walk side by side with that? Does it come in aesthetically with the character telling you, hey, I need to do this? Or how does that work with you when you're developing the narrative for your novels, short stories, or plays?
I could talk about this all night and all day. I think that the essential ingredient for me is that when I first listened to reggae music, and I've got heavily involved in that, yes. And the artists that I was listening to, they were never shy of as themes for their storytelling in creating a song. They were never shy to speak about their experiences or the experiences of their community. That was always, that was perpetual. It was always the theme from what I grew up on when I was a teenager. Yeah. And I guess that is the main ingredient that I took with me in my story writing, that, okay, these guys, that's what they addressed. They address their community, they address the struggles, they address poverty, they address all these things that were visible in their community, that what they could feel. And so I decided that I'm going to follow that same path. Yes. I mean, there's still a drum beat to it. And for me, it's not about me creating stories. I mean, these stories are already there. They are already, all I'm doing is plucking them out and writing them down and making them important, because otherwise they'd be forgotten and neglected. And so that is what I take from reggae music. And well, not just reggae music, all kinds of music, because obviously you grow older, you try different musical genres. I mean, jazz, I love jazz now. I love the blues now. I love, in fact, when my father passed away, I was looking at his record collection, and he had a guy called Louis Jordan, you know, early 1950s. He could play sax, he could sing, he could dance, he could do the lot. Yes. My God, what a performer he was. I started to get into him. I mean, people talk about who created rock and roll. I would suggest look at people like Louis Jordan of the early 1950s. You know, he come from that big band experience, and then he rocked and he rolled. And so they all inform me.
Yeah, for myself, it's funny. Like I didn't intend this when I started writing, but I ended up writing a novel and a collection of short stories, and then I wrote another novel and then a novella, and then I realized, hey, what I think I want to do is maybe do a novel and a collection of stories, like for, you know, throughout my career, basically. And it would be like, I don't know what you call it, like a cycle, you know what I mean? Like artists call it a cycle. So I'd have a cycle. So I'd have my like working class council estate novels, that'd be a cycle. And then I have my crime fiction, that'd be a cycle. And then I have my surrealism, and that would be a cycle. And I found myself falling into these cycles almost unconsciously. And it's, but with the short stories, that would be a way to pay homage to my background is MCing. So I used to be a rapper from I was like 8 years old, you know, till I was about 18 years old, you know what I mean? So that was my training to be a novelist, I feel, because it's the only training I had. I didn't go to university, I didn't do an MA, I just wrote lyrics. And then I read lots and lots of books. And before I used to read books to write lyrics. And then then it became, I'm listening to lyrics to write books. You know what I mean? It's got the other way around. That's okay. So for me, the MC is the pinnacle, whether it's like a Jamaican MC or an African MC or an MC from America. That's the pinnacle for me of writing, because you got to spit that stuff. You know what I mean? You got to be able to say it. It's not like a novel. You know what I mean? You got to perform it as well. So it's doubly hard. And then on top of that is like comedy, stand-up comedy. I think is one of the pinnacles as well of writing. You know what I mean? Like you got to write and perform that is just like amazing. I remember it all. But yeah, so for me to pay homage to that background, Music for the Off-Key was my first collection of short stories. A Book of Blues is my second collection, and now Cosmogramma. The next collection, which is nearly there, I've got 9 stories of that, is going to be Conversations with the Unseen, and that's a Soweto Kinch, the British jazz artist. It's his novel, his album. Sorry, I took that title. So all the short stories are going to be referred to music. And how I don't really like Cosmogramma. Obviously, when I first heard Cosmogramma, I'm a huge Flying Lotus fan. When I first heard Cosmogramma, I just got such a vibe off it. I didn't know I was going to write a collection called Cosmogramma, but I was listening to that stuff all the time, and I was finding all the Cosmogramma, finding all the Flying Lotus that I could get just to hear and write to. And then I don't know, as the stories were written that I kind of just vibe to it. Like whatever I felt, there was a response to those stories, and wherever I went would be the right response. So I didn't necessarily prescriptively sit down and listen to just Flying Lotus. I was just like, I'm getting that vibe now. I've got that vibe now. I can go and try and do something that emulates that. And I was so glad that you said it feels like an album, because particularly with this one, I know I know Flying Lotus, I keep getting mixed up, but Flying Lotus wanted to make an album that was just seamless with Cosmogramma, where one chat just flowed into another. And so I wanted to kind of do that with this book. And I actually asked him on Twitter, I was like, please, can I use your title? Do you mind if I steal your title and stuff? And he was like, you know, can I have your blessing? And he said, yes, he retweeted it. Yeah, he retweeted it. So I was like, all right, I'll take that as a yes then.
I give me chills. So that gives me too much chills. The sounds they create are also these great contrasts that bring so much nuance to the characters, and it's all embedded. I think that and we get that in your amazing collections, in your work. Would you guys want to read a little bit from the books a little bit? Yeah. Give a little sampling. A little sampling.
Yeah, cool.
Oh my God. Fan club president Jerry Thompson, both you guys right now.
Okay.
Holy moly.
This is an extract. Kemosha's escaped. She was taken to a bar in Port Royal where the owner is trying to force her into prostitution. But she escapes and she hides out in a barrel maker's backyard. This barrel maker is called Ravenhide. And Ravenhide, he's a swordsman. And so he fears that Kemosha will probably get caught. So he decides to teach her in swordplay. And then he goes to the owner of the bar and the man who once owned Kemosha, and he says to her, look, if she can defy death by dueling with you for 100 seconds, if she can avoid death, can she claim a freedom? And he agrees to that. So this is the part where Kemosha has to fight for her very life. Hear all, Ravenhide suddenly shouted. Hear all. All eyes turned on him and then to me. I found your black strumpet, Ravenhide announced. First, Mr. Powell glanced at me, then his eyes narrowed and glared. Disbelief marked his forehead. The night man of the barrels, he shouted. A long time since you had bought rum from my tavern or even bartered for a mug of water. And you claim you have found my black strumpet? I'll say you have given her shelter. He went for his sword, leaped over the counter and rushed towards me. The crowd backed away as he waved his blade high in the air. I was too shocked to move. Before you take the life of this slave strumpet, Ravenhide said, stepping between me and my on-rushing owner. Is she really a fair challenge to you? What sport is there if you kill her so easily? The Black Witch fled from my ownership after wounding Mr. March, Mr. Powell raged. Her liver is mine to nail where I choose. I bartered 5 pieces of 8 for her. 5! Will you compensate me? No, replied Ravenhide. But if you kill her now, you will never recover those pieces of 8. The tavern hushed. Men paused their drinking. The mulatto girl managed to free herself from the 2 men and fled with her crutch. I heard her hopping over the cobbled stones. Bop-poom, bop-poom, bop-poom. I concentrated my gaze on a red stain on the floor. I spotted an ant scurrying to a corner. May I present a challenge, Ravenhide went on. You dare present me with a challenge? Mr. Powell responded. Insolence. It could increase your fortune and luck, said Ravenhide. And if you win, it will make me the poorer. Mr. Powell considered his options. He flicked his one eye at me. Me can't take this. I said, yeah, save me good self. My heart going to bounce out of my chest. Name the challenge, Mr. Powell said with his voice raised. Ravenhide hesitated. Doubt crept into his eyes. His lips moved, but no words were spoken. He coughed, placed a hand over his mouth, and steadied himself. Maybe him finally realized me can't do this. Name the challenge, Mr. Powell repeated. If you can part her black skin with your sword and make her blood flow before a count of 100, Ravenhide said, then there will be no price for the barrels I make for you for a year, nor any other work you might desire for me to perform. The sword loosened in my hand. A strange feeling grew from my feet to my stomach. My forehead was suddenly wet with hot sweat. I felt my heartbeat on my forehead. I couldn't look up. Someone laughed. Others joined in. A count of 100, said Mr. Powell. You jest to me, Ravenhide. The laughter grew louder. What say you? Challenged Ravenhide. Do you accept my challenge? Brave quartermaster or Captain Morgan himself, one who has conquered the Spanish Main and walked its sands. I lifted my gaze. Mr. Powell glared at Ravenhide. He scratched his chin and chuckled with an evil pleasure. Behind the counter, I spotted Indica with hands on her hips, shaking her head. She wasn't impressed. The young girl with the swollen face only had eyes for the floor. Give the black strumpet a chance, called a man from a corner. What have you to lose? Shouted another. And if, by slim fortune, said Mr. Powell, that the black strumpet manages to defend herself for a count of 100, what do I lose? Without hesitation, Ravenhide answered, you lose the 5 pieces of 8 you paid for her. She wins her freedom. Indica shook her head. If she wins, you better find me another who can cook and scrub in his God-cursed son. Your grumbling would be the death of me. Mr. Powell rubbed his chin once more. He gazed at his sword and smiled. I accept, he said. I think what blood I had in my legs had escaped me, for I could barely stand. I held onto Ravenhide's arm. He whispered into my ear, remember what I taught you. You're not fighting him. You're defending against his sword. His blade is your enemy. Be a skinny target. I wanted to be a target that was plenty miles away. Outside, someone yelled. Outside. Ravenhide led me through the tavern's front door. An arch of an orange sun still shone over the western hills. Not only did this tavern empty, but other places of drink too. There must have been over 100 and a score men, all eager to see my death, maybe 200. They ranted and cursed. They had taken their mugs and tankards with them. They puffed in their pipes and sniffed their tobacco. A few women were in the crowd too. I saw the one-legged mulatto girl watching from behind a horse and cart. They made a circle on a cobbled road for the duel. Some climbed on shacks and low-level buildings on both sides. This will be quick, said one man. The strumpet won't last the first plunge of a sword, said another. I stopped there.
Well, brutal, delicious, beautiful. Oh my gosh. So visually.
See, man.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a great scene.
Holy moly.
Good
night.
I can't wait to read that. Yeah, exactly. That is like, wow, amazing. Yeah, love it, love it. So I'm gonna get straight into it. Oh, I forgot to mention when you were talking about music, I forgot to mention that this T-shirt I'm wearing is from it's a DBC T-shirt, which is the Dread Broadcasting Corporation, which is the first pirate radio station in Black Britain. Yeah, founded by a man called Leroy Lepke Anderson. Yeah, so I just had to say that. Yeah, I thought I'd wear this T-shirt for this event as well.
You're a gem finder.
Look them up, man. DBC. Yeah. So this is the. Oh, sorry, it is in the front, and then if I turn around, that's the original. That's the original DBC.
Pretty cool.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the original DBC T-shirt. It was in the 80s, man. You know, 80s they had these T-shirts and stuff. They were big. Look them up. Google them, man. DBC. It's like all the musical traditions that come out of the UK kind of like stem from this first pirate radio station, man. They were the first people to do it, man. In the UK, yeah. So,
Can I have it?
Yeah, very proud to wear this. Yeah. No, I fought too hard for this, but they are for sale. So yeah, you can put some. Yeah. Check them out. So anyway, I'm gonna read a story called Seed, and I wasn't going to say too much about this, but I think I should because I'm obviously not going to read the whole story. But this is basically about climate change and what's happened in London is there's been a storm. I'll talk about this, and then these seeds start to get found all over London, and people pick them up, and it's weird. These trees got these new seeds we've never seen before, and it turns out that these seeds actually, once a person has picked them up, they develop into a doppelganger of whoever touched them, basically. And at first, they start off at the bottom of the garden, and then they're halfway up your garden, and then they're at your front door and stuff. And yeah, that's basically where the story's going. So I had to spoil it in a way because you're not going to get the whole story, but I'll just read the opening of that, the origin of where these seeds come from. It had been a good long summer of hot days and balmy evenings, the sky morphing from blue into a haze of orange and red. But the autumn changed it all, bringing dark clouds, continual rain. For the first few weeks of September, a storm circled above London, drenching the city in relentless showers lasting whole days. Soon it grew difficult for Dapper to remember long hours in the park, hurling bursts of laughter while inhaling newly cut grass. The evening spent with Charles, sipping pints outside the local pub, finding strange comfort in the tawny glow of sash windows. Temperate nights in his garden, a sweet glass of rosé for company, silently toasting his luck. In that fortnight of oyster grey skies, it was common instead to find felled branches littering the streets each morning, and car windshields covered with a mosaic of leaves. Garbage cans lay on their sides or were found streets away. Occasionally, there was the open-mouthed corpse of a fox. After the rains, the sun returned, albeit with weaker rays, and those who observed the severe weather warnings began to venture outside. Dapo wandered into the back garden to survey the extent of the storm damage, and was surprised to find seeds littering the grass, particularly beneath the pear tree he and his wife had planted 10 years ago. They were everywhere, glistening and round, tiny glinting eyes peeking upward as if from a fringe of green hair. They were purple and bloated, a few split open to reveal a slightly pink, fleshy interior. He picked one up. It resembled a water chestnut, curved inward at the center, except it was slightly rough to the touch. The shell was lined with strange, almost native patterns, on closer inspection more like whorls. No two seeds were the same. He craned his neck, examining his tree. He'd guessed they'd grown from there, as the tree had sprouted butterfly wing petals and new, still tender branches, lily pad green, bowed and heavy. He watched the clear sky looking over the fences at his neighbours' gardens. The Dentons was treeless, but there was a rose bush. The Aggymans had a sizable apple tree. Both bore new green, supple branches, shimmering blue and violet petals. All were laden with the fruit. He assumed but couldn't see that their grass was full of fallen seeds too. Nothing should have grown that late in the season, let alone so quickly. He rolled the seed between his fingers until he was disquieted by the way the markings rubbed against his skin, creating a rasp he didn't hear as much as feel. He took it into the kitchen to show Misra. She was sitting at the kitchen table, reading a novel and drinking tea, her usual routine before she went upstairs and began work. Dapo slipped the seed into his pocket and closed the French doors. He made his own cup of lemon and ginger, then stood by the sink, sipping from the mug, enjoying the silence of the day. Aye wasn't there. He spent the weekend with his grandparents, Misra's father and mother, who brought him home after nursery on Monday afternoons. The house felt anticipatory without him, the air pregnant with the unknown moment that birthed his arrival, that welcome burst of sound and blurred action. He appreciated the time Misra's parents afforded them, time to work on individual projects, whatever they might be, time to make love or talk over steaming mugs, time to make time for themselves. Many of their fellow parents, their friends, family and neighbours, didn't have the luxury of in-laws to take the strain of raising a child. In the old days, they would have all lived together in some dusty compound, surrounded by hordes of family, intimate or distant, or at least in the same village, at worst in the same town, separated by scant miles. Now there were only Misra's parents nearby, as Dapo's had returned to Nigeria many years ago. It was difficult to assess if they were better off or otherwise in this new millennial age of globalization, of families located anywhere they could afford, of betterment. What are you thinking? She said from the kitchen table, putting down the book. It was a slim volume, not a novel at all, he realized. What women want. Nothing useful, he said. Hey, look at what I found in the garden. He took the seed from his pocket. She turned it between her fingers like he had before, a faint smile on her lips. Where'd you get this? The garden. There's tons. Come and have a look. She gave it back and followed him, bending for various seeds of her own, examining each closely, holding them high against the light. Thin cloud had returned above, whiter, more expansive. The sun was a shining coin hidden behind muslin. Their pear tree bristled and shook in the breeze. Dapo watched her search the grass, telling himself he was focused on her response to the purple orbs, but after a while, he admitted he liked to watch her move. Misra's body was tiny, wide, curved like the seed. He laughed, admonishing himself. What do you think? He croaked, throat dry. Tea did that to him sometimes. They're beautiful, like little jewels. They are. Where do you think they came from? The trees, I think. They've got new branches. He pointed in the direction of the pear tree. Mizra walked along the central garden path and stood beneath the tree. He joined her. She smelled of sandalwood, the joss stick she burnt that morning. Oh yeah, she said, but why none on the tree? No, he said, checking to make sure. She was right. They looked up, necks craned. All the branches were bare. He wrapped his arms around her waist, kissing the back of her head. So pretty. Yeah, like precious stones. She held a seed close to her chest, cupping it with both hands. What are they? I have no idea. I've never seen them before. You should Google them. Yes, I like this one. I see that. She smiled and he kissed her hair again. It was soft, her skin warm as earth. She placed the seed gently inside her pocket as if it might break. Dapper did the same. He squeezed her to him and they went inside. Neither had any idea why they took the seeds, and they didn't speak about it again. It just seemed like the logical thing to do.
Poetry and the almost a thread of some dark shit coming out.
Yeah, good.
Very, very,
Yeah.
very nice. Yeah. Great
Thank you.
reading. Bravo, you guys. Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
Rich in detail. I love the
Thank
detail
you.
in that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the phrases are just gorgeous, but you know.
Sure. Yeah. I'm glad you got the dark shit.
There's always some dark stuff, and there's a lot of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of it in this one and throughout the collection. I was worried a bit that it might be a bit too bleak, but I mean, I like writing dark short stories. I'm not naturally a bleak person, Alex will tell you, but I think I'm not dark at all. But like, you know, when I write it, I like that tension. I like that suspense.
So do your readers.
Yeah, great.
I know that there's been a great talk about the small acts, and I want to congratulate you guys both on working with Steve McQueen. And could you tell us a little bit about what that process presented to you? We saw it happen. I watched an episode last night, the Lovers Rock, and I mean, just so much music and so much love and so much history and so much family and so much.
Yeah.
You just don't get that. So can you give us some remnants of residue of how you feel the experience has sort of changed your lives?
Yes, it has. It was about 4 or 5 years ago. I think the writer's room, is that the case, Courttia? Was it 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And
my daughter's 6. So
it was all cloaks and daggers, wasn't it? And you know, no one knew who was going to be in this writer's room. And when I turned up, Courttia was sitting there. I thought, well, I know somebody. So we for the first few weeks, I think it was, we was working on themes or what should be introduced to the narrative, what kind of ideas we had. Steve had certain ideas. I mean, Mangrove was kind of set in stone before we even sat down, wasn't it?
Yeah. And Lovers Rock. Lovers Rock, he knew he was going to do that as well.
Yeah, Mangrove and Lovers Rock. Yeah, those two episodes were kind of set before we actually sat down. But with me, Steve coming one morning and asking us, can we find a narrative that that depicts a young man going through institutions, children's home, prisons, whatever. And I think it was Alistair, one of our co-writers, who pointed at me, said, Alex, that is you. And so for the rest of that morning, I related my tale from Children's Home, Brixton, and the rest of it. And at the end of it, Steve said, yeah, that's the one. And to be honest, that kind of made me panic a little bit. I thought, oh my gosh, you know, everyone out there is going to see my story, you know, good and bad, and you know, and see me at my most traumatic points in my childhood, which is quite overwhelming. And so I think afterwards I had a word with Courttia and maybe a couple of, but Courttia first, and I said, you know, should I do this? You know, can I do this? Yeah. And Courttia said, are you crazy or something similar? And I went home. I talked it over with my wife and my family, and they said, like, Courttia, are you crazy? You know, so yeah, I came back the next day, said, yeah, let's do this. And it was this incredible experience, you know, coming on set and seeing somebody at me. It was just surreal. And
the thing is, you've been writing this story in different forms in the
yes, I have.
beginning of
Yeah,
your career.
yeah, yeah. There's
You know
a
what I mean?
lot
So
of
I
me.
knew the story, you know what I mean, before we went in the room. So
Yeah,
yeah, I knew the reality in the novels, you know what I mean. But this was the first time it was like your name was on it, you know what I mean? It was like going to
right.
be
Yeah,
you, and so
there's
yeah, that
no
was a big
escape.
deal.
I think even Courttia will admit that I'm sure in the Scholar and Society Within, there's a lot of you in there, in maybe one or two characters.
Completely.
And
but
Bricks and
hidden.
Rock was no different, and Issa Rae Claim was no different for me. I think it doesn't matter if you're writing sci-fi or fantasy, you can't help but put yourself in your initial words, I believe. And that was definitely the case with me. So, but I did feel naked at some point but now I feel more at ease of it. But at first I did feel pretty naked. I thought, oh God, people going to read my novels and say, okay. I know where that kind of came from, where that idea or chapter or scene came from. I mean, it's you're writing a lot of truth. And I think that's why I've maintained my career, because I feel I'm writing a lot of truth and real situations that can connect with readers out there. So it's real. And Courttia's writing to save, even though he's gone off to sci-fi and other strands of genres, and it's still real. Real emotions, real experiences.
I mean, even just what I read, the house that I'm talking about in Cosmogramma, in Seed, in that story, that's my house, man. That's the house I'm living in now. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, so you're stealing and borrowing from everything, but mostly you're stealing and borrowing from yourself,
Yeah.
But yeah, like my thing obviously was completely different. I remember sitting around the table and talking about all these different stories, and I think the first Steve came up to me one day and he was just like, you're going to do Leroy Logan's story, he called it, like, that's what it's called at the time, which ended up being Red, White and Blue. And I had a mixture of feelings. I was really grateful because throughout the weeks that we've been doing the room, everybody had been getting their episodes and I didn't have an episode at that point in time. So I was a bit like, am I going to get sacked? It's been weeks now and I can see, okay, go off and do this, go off and do that. And I was like, wow, like no one's saying to me, go off and do anything. So there was a mixture of relief, but also like real fear, because like I'd met Leroy and this was such a like amazing, powerful story. And this was going to be the first time in my life that I was going to write a story where the guy had sat and looked in my eyes, man. and there's a huge weight of responsibility in telling this guy's story. And of course, I'm telling the story of a Black man in the 80s who became a policeman. And I know in the States it's slightly different, but like, yeah, it's more common. But that's what I say in the film. But like, like in the 80s in Britain, it was not a big thing. Like people didn't do it, you know what I mean? And if you did it, yeah, like you saw, you can get ostracized from your own community. So there was like, how do I make this guy empathetic and all of this stuff? And I was filled with a bit of fear. Plus it was like, I've been shouting from the rooftops for about 20 years that I was good enough to do screenwriting and film and stuff. And this is the first time I'd actually been tested. So I was like, okay, what if I can't? You know what I mean? What if actually, so there's all these things. But then it was fine. And Leroy was amazing. And Steve, me went back and forth on it, and we got a vibe together, working together and stuff. Because obviously it was co-written with Steve, so it was like back and forth with Steve, and that was really cool. And then after that, it was liked enough for me to get Lovers Rock as well, which I could then switch it a bit. You know what I mean? Do it in a completely different style, and I felt a little bit more confident too.
Yeah, but Lovers Rock is a masterpiece. The whole series is a masterpiece. But
yes.
Getting that insight, lifting the hood up on the mechanics, if you will, of how the story came about, amazing. I'm going to watch it again tonight after I have my martini. We're running out of a little time, but I want to ask one question about has the pandemic changed? I know you're working on new things, of course, but has the pandemic changed how you're informing your ideas, or has it informed your ideas in new ways because of what we're dealing with now? And can you talk about some of the things that you're working on now?
It's made me appreciate workers, basically, nurses, people who work in supermarkets, people who make our life kind of durable and comfortable. You know,
Yeah.
so it's really given me an empathy towards those people,
That's
those
it.
sometimes put down people who
Yeah,
do not
yes.
get the wage rises they deserve and all the rest of it. And to hear their narratives, that really affected me deeply. I mean, for the first few months of the pandemic, I could not create because I was just glued to the television. Maybe I was glued to the television too much. It was probably doing me damage
We
to
all were.
see these broken families. You
Mhm.
know, this ordinary family is a nurse and going to work, and
Yes.
she's caught COVID, and 2 months later she might pass. You know,
Yeah.
and she's left her. You know, it affected me deeply. I think
Yeah.
most writers are
Mhm.
empathetic. You know, have empathy. You have to have empathy to become a writer, I believe, a good writer anyway. And so it affected me quite. Yeah, so I had that on my mind, and it made me rethink a few things about how do I engage, interact with those people, and you know, maybe aware, do not dismiss them, appreciate for what they do, and the rest of that. So, I mean, in my family, I've lost, you know, 3 or 4 older members here and Jamaica through COVID. So, and I know the devastation it caused, and the frustration, and especially that the family at that point could not grieve or even go to the funeral, and all those issues as well. So, but thousands of people that had that experience. So hopefully it's made me more humble and more kind of considerate of those people who've gone through that, you know, the ordinary people who keep us going, basically, you know, put food on our shelves, and work on the cashier tills, you know, and serve food and so forth. So, you know, it's made me a bit more humble, you know. So sometimes as a writer, you think, yay, look at me, I'm a writer. You know, isn't it grand that I'm a writer? But not really. When you see this going on, you know, it kind of makes you humble in that way.
These could be new characters coming up in some narrative could really enlighten and heal many people. Courttia, what about you?
Yeah. I mean, like River Called Time was kind of about. It's very much about like working class people and menial workers and things like that. So I suppose I had that on my mind, and my novel came out like it was meant to actually come out in the year of the pandemic, the August of the pandemic, but it got pushed back to last year. And so it was we were still very much in it, you know. So I really felt it deeply. I've been thinking about these things quite a lot, because I'd written it like just after Small Acts, I'd written the remainder of River Called Time. So I was very much thinking about working class people and what that means, and you know, the lack of appreciation for them. And I think I even speak about it quite a lot in River, but obviously it's in a sci-fi kind of abstract kind of way, parallel worlds kind of way. But no, I mean, I feel I got my kids like were 12 and 5 at the time, you know. So I was doing homeschooling for about a year and 2 months. And then I say when I was doing homeschooling, really my wife was doing homeschooling. I was doing my little bit. I was trying to do as much as I could, but I was also in the midst of writing screenplays. And then I got started on August Town, which is, you know, to speak on what we're working on next. I'm working on Kai Miller's August Town adaptation of that novel as a feature film. So I got into that. And so it's really difficult because I was trying to do both. So to be honest with you, I just got wore out by by that whole that thing, and then just only being able to go out for something like in the first part of it, like an hour a day, 2 hours a day, and stuff like that. It was crazy. So I just got on with stuff, and I didn't really. A lot of people say they couldn't write, but I was kind of forced into. I had to write, you know what I mean? I had to get into it. So I tried to create a little space around me, a little creative space around me where I could write. And my wife was really great about helping me to have that space and taking the load off me a little bit. And so I just, I got into doing that, and I wrote quite a few projects during that time. I've got a short story coming out now with The Cuckoo Cage. It's part of an anthology called The Cuckoo Cage, which is about working class superheroes based on English folkloric legends. And mine's called Jacqueline, and it's about the toppling of the statues that happened around the time during the pandemic in Bristol. You know, the coastal statue and all that stuff. Like, you know, so this is a young woman based in Bristol who has superpowers, but she's kind of very civic minded, and she starts like trying to take down statues with their superpowers, basically. You know what I mean? So like slaver statues.
When's that coming out?
That's actually coming out like any day now. I think it's like February 18th or something like that. That's
in the US as well.
Yeah.
In the US?
Only in the UK, published by Common Press. Yeah, it's got like a range of, like a lot of black writers in there, a range of writers in there, but it's like working class superheroes. So I've been thinking about this kind of thing a lot, and just when something like this happens, like a pandemic or a big event or something like that, I always try not to have an immediate knee-jerk response. It's kind of like the music in a sense. I try and just see what happens and see what comes, and if I feel pulled in that direction, then I will write about it. But a lot of things I don't, like I let it pass me by. I'm not like Munya, Munya, the comedian boy, where like something happens and then like within an hour he's got a sketch about it. It's just a whole sketch. But he's almost he's doing something about the Tory party right now. The Tory party's over the pandemic right now. He had that out like the next day. I can't be Munya. You know what I mean? He's too good. So like, I just be like, all right, let me wait and see, and maybe I'll tackle that, and maybe I won't. You know.
This week is very exciting for us because your books hit the bookstores in California and I guess across the states. So we're very excited to be able to support and hand sell. That's what we do. We hand sell, and to talk about your works with our readers. What I'm wishing, of course, is at some point we can have live events again. And I'm going to ask you right now, if once we can get on planes and come to bookstores, will you come to Books Inc? Will you come to the Bay Area? Will you?
Oh yeah,
we do this. I would love to host you guys in person, and put some music on, put a turntable downstairs.
Yeah, man. Definitely.
Yeah. In fact, I've never been to the West Coast. I have family on the East Coast in Washington DC and Miami. My mother's in Washington DC. So before the pandemic, I was a regular visitor to the US. So it'd be great to actually finally land on the West Coast.
To the Bay Area, to Jerry Thompson.
Definitely. But we appreciate your passion as well, and your time as well, in selling the books as well, man. Definitely, it's a really big thing for us. So please, just like, know that we really love that.
Oh, I really appreciate it.
So I think I'm ready for some questions, Elena. Well, thank you guys for your time as well.
I see that Alex answered one in the chat, but if you want to expand on it, what is the most difficult part of the writing process for you, and how do you get through it? You said writing the first few chapters and developing a narrative, but how do you work past that struggle?
A lot of it is done in my head. So sometimes I do not address the keyboard or my writing pad. I just carry it with me like a baggage in the back of my head, thinking, oh God, how am I going to solve this solution, this narrative problem? So sometimes that process might carry on for weeks until I actually address the story on my laptop before I actually start writing the first chapter. So I do try to do a lot of problem solving. It could be on a bus, on a train journey, because some 2 days a week or 1 day a week, I work in Manchester, where I'm a tutor in creative writing. So a lot of the problem solving is done at those moments. And so it can be, sometimes you might get a negative reaction if you try to force it onto the page. You know, sometimes narrative just comes organically. And I try to work that way rather than force it out of me. Oh God, I haven't written 2,000 words today. You know, I can't work like that. It'll do my head in. So I just kind of try to let it flow.
I don't know. I don't really have a worst part. I like it. I like all the parts of it. To be honest, I enjoy every part of the process. I think, I don't know, I was gonna say maybe getting started, but no, not really. I suppose, if I had to pick a worst part of it, I would say the middle of the book. The middle of the book. That's when you've gone so far that you can't go back, and you've been doing it for a long time, and you can't quite remember why you started, and it's a long way to go to the end. And it's like trying to swim across the channel or something, or the ocean, and you're in the middle, man. That's the toughest part of a book for me. And then you really have to deep down and say, okay, forget about it.
A bit like the first time marathon runner. A bit like the first time.
But I'm like that every time.
where they might hit 30 miles and think, oh God, what have I done, kind of thing.
You get the burn. When you get the burn, like, I get the burn every book. And the first time it happened to me, it scared the hell out of me. I was just like, what is going on? I feel like I can't do this, man. How am I going to keep going? And then like subsequently after that, I was like, oh yeah, no, it's the burn. Okay, I recognize this now. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, I know I just got to dig deep and keep going and I'll be all right. Funny enough, that didn't happen with River. With River, but then I had a pause of about 10 years. So I suppose when I went back to it, I'd worked out all the ideas. I'd had so long thinking about it. So I expected it to burn and it didn't. I just plowed through, you know, but it was almost again like starting again from the midpoint. So it wasn't so bad as well. Yeah, because I'd written part one already, like I said. I'd written it. So I already had 100 odd pages. Yeah.
Yeah, some books come easy, like East of Acre Lane. I think because I've done so much previous work before that with lyrics and short poems and journal entries, diary entries and so on. So East of Acre Lane was almost fully formed before I actually sat down and wrote it. It was just there. So that took me 4 or 5 months to write. You know, it's quite incredible. But other books, you know, that are not, shorter, took me a longer time, like 12 months. Sometimes I would approach my laptop and only one sentence would come out. You know, I had to just get up and do something else. That's how it can go sometime.
Yeah, my next novel is going to be autofiction, and I'm finding that just in the process that you're talking about, Alex, I have the same thing where you carry it around with you for a long time. Finding that really difficult. It's quite a traumatic period in my life that I'm going to write about. So gearing up to write about that is probably really difficult as well. Yeah, it's taking me a long time, and I'm just like, I'm not going to force myself into that. Like, I'm not going to push myself to do it. I have to feel that urge, like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I can't hold it in my head anymore. Now let's write. Yeah, it's taking a long time.
You're doing multiple books at one time at this point. You've got quite a few things coming out, yeah?
No, I haven't got anything coming out after these two, and that's kind of like I made a conscious decision not to jump into a next book and to kind of because I've had two out in the same year. I'm kind of like, okay, you know what? Let me let these breathe a little bit. I was going to do it. I was going to jump in a bit, and my wife was like, "What are you doing? Like, you've got enough on your plate already. Don't write another book." So I said, "All right, I'll wait for a little bit." And I just spoke to my publisher, and we were like, "Okay, look, yeah, you can give it a little bit of time." But I do think about multiple books. So there's about 2 or 3 novels that I could do next, and it took a long time for me to even choose which one. I could keep going speculative. I could do another couple of speculative novels, or I could go historical. I have a historical novel that I want to write, but I was like, okay, let me just wait for that one. Let me just do. I think it's going to be this one. I have to get this one out of the way. Yeah.
You guys are complete. You guys are brilliant and geniuses, and we're going to be celebrating the current works until we see you guys again. I want to thank you so much for allowing us to have this chat and to letting me into your world a little bit. Let us get to work, sell some books, and hopefully we can keep in touch. And thank you again for your time. Love you guys.
Thank you. Great questions,
thank you
man.
for your time. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Jerry. As always, I always love hearing you. So thank you for taking the time to do this. And Alex and Courttia, that was delightful. Absolutely will echo Jerry's request that you come to Booksync in person. You need to come to the West Coast. I don't know why you haven't done that yet.
I haven't been either. So yeah, I'm coming.
Yeah, you need to come. You need to come to the West Coast and the East Bay.
How long is the flight from DC to
probably about 5 or 6 hours, I would say. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Man,
but you know, you just take a nap or write a book or start another project. It's fine. You're not busy enough. You'll find some motivation when you're flying here. We would absolutely love to host you.
I'd love to
and
do
hopefully
it.
that will allow
beautiful.
Within the next year or two. That would be amazing. And I'm sure by then you'll each have.
Well, let's keep in touch because, as I say, you know, when the pandemic's out of the way, I can travel more freely.
Yeah, and Jerry happens to live right above our Alameda Booksync location, so he can just run down and interview you.
No, everyone knows that already. Can't hide. was the
You
best
play your
commute.
records loud enough, everybody knows.
It was the best commute for a couple of years. I just if I had to be at work at 2 o'clock. I'd leave my house at 2 o'clock. It was hilarious.
Dream
Anyway,
job.
Loved it. Oh,
Yeah, that was great. And this was recorded for anyone who had to miss any part of it. If you had to step away, we'll upload it to our YouTube channel soon. So thank you everyone for taking the time. That was a great way to spend a Saturday afternoon. And I know it was your evening, so thank you for doing that, both of you.
Thank you so much.
Lena, thank you.
Ocean. Yeah, thank you. And everyone have a great day. And thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.